Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Brilliant, okay. I know it's the end of a long day, everyone's brains are kind of melting into their shoes, and I'm basically all that stands between you and the happy hours of London. So I'm going to try and keep this light, so it's going to investigate illegal logging in Cambodia. Nice, fun, chirpy topic for everyone. Just a quick show of hands. Who has been to Cambodia? Okay, right. So I'll just give a quick rundown of Cambodia just because I think that could be important context. Basically, I should probably start by introducing myself actually, that would be better, wouldn't it? My name is Gerald Flynn. I'm a reporter for Mongabay. I'm based in Southeast Asia. And according to the spokesperson of the National Police in Cambodia, I am either a criminal, a terrorist, or a spy. He couldn't make up his mind on which one. So I've been investigating environmental crimes in Cambodia for several years. Started with the Pulitzer Center's Rainforest Investigations Network, and Mongabay very kindly picked me up and gave me a job after that. So why Cambodia? Why forests? Since 2000, Cambodia has lost more than 1/3 of its primary forests. A lot of that has been taken through illegal logging, largely to finance the government. So it's a lot of very corrupt individuals within the government that are essentially benefiting from these illicit timber sales. The timber trade in Cambodia goes way back. The Khmer Rouge used it to finance their fighting. They also used gemstone trades as well. The current, very recently, previous administration from Hun Sen, who was in power for 39 years, used it to shore up political allies, ensuring that the timber trade flows through his network of patronage. And even though Cambodia had elections in August 2023, we're going to say elections because there's no other viable party, where Hun Sen's eldest son, Hun Manet, former commander of the army, which itself did a lot of logging, is now the prime minister. So that's where we're at with Cambodia. Obviously, as you can probably imagine from that sort of setup, press freedoms are pretty dire. The Cambodia Daily, one of the largest independent bilingual publications, was shut down in 2017 on bogus tax charges. The Phnom Penh Post was sold the following year to a government-friendly PR company. There are allegations that it was a very coerced sale. And then Voice of Democracy, which sort of sprung up from the ashes of the Post and the Daily, was shut down in 2023 for accurately quoting a government minister. So since then, journalists have been shot and killed, as was the case in December last year, the most recent one, for a Cambodian journalist, Cheng Chuang, who was investigating illegal logging. And environmental activists have also been killed, exiled, jailed, tortured, you name it, bad things have happened. That's sort of why we wanted to focus on illegal logging in Cambodia, because obviously it's well documented, but the state of the press freedoms in Cambodia meant that not many people had been looking at it more recently. So we wanted to sort of pick up where other people had left off. And I'm going to start by showing you a little bit of the consequences of what happens when you investigate illegal logging in Cambodia by showing you part of a documentary called Chasing Deforestation that myself and my colleagues Andy Ball, Main Kroy Punlok, and Sre Vuta all worked on together. Investigating illegal logging in Cambodia, not the best choice.
That is Mongabay reporter Gerald Flynn, and the visuals you just saw, those were filmed in the forest of Preah Roca in Cambodia. Jerry was accompanying community members who were trying to fight illegal deforestation. To do such patrol in Preah Roca is dangerous. To do one 12 kilometers south, where we're locating this episode, is almost impossible. Prey Lang Wildlife Sanctuary, a rainforest that should be protected, is being devastated without witness. Across the region, the environmental activists that have tried to stop it are facing threats and are being persecuted.
One of Asia's leading environmental activists was gunned down in Cambodia.
A Cambodian court has sentenced 5 members of the environmental group Mother Nature to prison terms of up to 20 months.
Community organizations, activists, and academics told Mongabay that the government is complicit and corruption is rampant. And some are now saying that Prey Lang is nothing more than a protected sanctuary on paper. In this episode, we take a closer look at Prey Lang Wildlife Sanctuary in Cambodia and sit down to talk to one of the main logging companies and the leading group trying to protect these forests. I am Romy Castagnino, and this is Chasing Deforestation.
So I should have added that, not just the team that we had on the ground, but also Mongabay's video team really kind of pulled this all together, because as I think a lot of people have mentioned over the course of today, these sort of investigations are not something you can really do by yourself. It really does take a team effort. There we go. Okay. So, before we go into the jungle and find ourselves being chased by armed government rangers, it's good to do some preparation. That really, really helps. And so this whole investigation began with satellite imagery. And because I have no hobbies, I sort of spend a lot of my time looking at hotspots for deforestation in Cambodia on satellite imagery. So I typically would use QGIS for this. At the time, we did have access to Planet Labs through the NICFI program. It's part of the Norwegian government-funded initiative to monitor deforestation. That program no longer functions in the same way, and someone mentioned earlier, Sentinel Hub, the European Space Agency's EO browser, is kind of being sunsetted. And now there is a Copernicus browser, which, if I had another hour, I could rant about that, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to tell you, basically, we noticed a road had been cut around sort of between March and May in 2023 from this land concession belonging to a company called Think Biotech. Now, Think Biotech are a known illegal logging operation. They run, ironically, a reforestation plantation of about 34,000 hectares, but it happens to sit conveniently on the border of Prey Lang Wildlife Sanctuary. And to give you some context, Prey Lang Wildlife Sanctuary is 490,000 hectares of protected rainforest. So this is, I have it here in my notes somewhere, more than 3 times the size of Greater London. Just to try and, because I know sometimes those big numbers just don't really mean anything. But yeah, so it's home to a range of endangered species, Asian elephants, pangolins, various gibbon species, bird species, and about 250,000 indigenous people who live in and around the forest, largely in harmony with it, in a sort of semi-sustainable way. However, Think Biotech, the company's plantation, basically is regarded as one of the most responsible companies for the ongoing destruction of Prey Lang. And so that's where this began, with us sort of, every now and then I'll just go and have a little look and see what they're up to, because they're always up to something. So yes, here we have the logging road being cut in, and then, I've gone the wrong way. So yeah, we could see very clearly that this road comes from the company's land straight into the protected forest, which looks pretty suspicious. So then we go into the jungle. So we had kind of planned a lot of this quite well, or so we thought. And this is where I'm going to sort of plug geospatial data. If you're not using that, then environmental investigations are just going to be incredibly difficult. We had maps of exactly where we wanted to go. Sourcing that data can be difficult. The maps that we've got for the protected areas in Cambodia, they were very kindly leaked to us by someone who actually does care about the environment in the Ministry of Environment. Whereas the data on land concessions as to which company owns which plot has been mapped out very diligently by some human rights organizations in Cambodia. So we were using that data on QGIS to plan it from the desk before we ventured into the jungle. And also, we had on our phones Q Field, which is a mobile version of QGIS. And if you haven't used it and you do field investigations, I can't recommend it enough. It's incredible, not for just transporting your data into the field, but also generating more data as you go along. And so that's basically what we planned to do. This trip was with around 12 community activists, who you can see sat here enjoying lunch far more than I did. And they had wanted to go into the jungle and basically document freshly cut tree stumps. And they had their own database because they do these patrols regularly. So any coordinates that didn't match their own database would then be examples or evidence of newly cut logs that we could then link back to various companies. So yeah, as you can see, we've got GPS devices here to actually make sure those coordinates are as accurate as possible. Although I will say that, yeah, if you're going to travel into the jungle in Cambodia, don't do it in April. That's a terrible, terrible time. It was, yeah, and don't do it in Doc Martens either. That was an even worse decision, frankly. It was 3 days traveling into the jungle. And during that time, we were riding in one of these. It's known locally as a koyan, which is not really a direct translation of, but the rough one would be like cow tractor, because you can put a cow in the back and it'll still go. But yeah, this thing nearly killed us all by repeatedly tipping over during the sort of muddy, rutted roads that we were having to travel through in the middle of the night. The whole time, because we had entered a protected area without the permission of the government, there was a very real risk that, you know, they could argue we're not supposed to be there. We would argue back that there are whole villages living inside these protected areas and have not been fully demarcated in terms of a core zone, a buffer zone, a community use zone, or sustainable use zone. So, yeah, that's on there. But, yeah, the plan was to basically document as much illegal logging as we could and try to find out exactly where that timber was going, what was being done with it, and who was profiting. So the thing that became very immediately clear was the fact that there was a lot of new deforestation. You know, the communities were seeing whole new logging tracts that they hadn't seen before as we ventured further into the jungle. And you can see here the carcass of a tree where obviously only the best timber has been taken, everything that has these sort of long branches coming off. That makes it very difficult to sort of strip it down and peel it, which is typically what is done to a lot of these trees, because if it's got no branches, really easy to make plywood from it. Once it's into plywood, virtually impossible to trace the origin, and commercially quite valuable, at least at scale. And so this may look like something that a toddler would draw on the wall of a house unsupervised, but this is actually my map of Cambodia. The black outline is the national borders, and I'm not going to, but I could probably tell you what just about any of these weird squiggles actually are. I mean, this right here is the Southern Cardamom Red Plus project, where numerous human rights abuses have been alleged by indigenous communities. And Prelang is right there in the middle. It has the great misfortune of being one of Southeast Asia's largest lowland rainforests. And so, as a result of the relatively flat topography, the fact that it crosses over 4 different provinces in Cambodia, it's really accessible, which is not good, because that means loggers, miners, poachers, every kind of scumbag imaginable can quite easily gain access, which they do regularly. So yeah, this is the map that we were kind of working off in terms of trying to find out where to look, because if you don't have a map, you don't know where to go. However, even the use of maps and satellite imagery is pretty frowned upon. The Cambodian government in 2017 threatened to sue NASA over its accurate depiction of deforestation. They did the same for Global Forest Watch and warned environmental activists that using satellite imagery without the government's consent was somehow a violation of sovereignty. Never provided any details as to how that worked, but they don't need to. So this, unfortunately, the situation has only gotten worse. This is just giving you a sort of rough idea of the sort of rate of deforestation that we're talking about. You know, and some areas are far worse affected than others. The Cardamom Mountain Range, for example, here, experiences relatively low levels of deforestation because it's an absolute hellscape to get to. It is mountainous, it experiences about 4 times more rainfall than the rest of Cambodia, and it's incredibly remote. If you want to drive there, you've got to give up a day. Whereas Prey Lang, on the other hand, you can see number 1 there is just being eaten away from the sides. And a lot of that is largely driven by Think Biotech and its sister company, Angkor Plywood. So, let's see. Yes, here you can see Che Pre Roca Wildlife Sanctuary, which is directly north of Prey Lang. And this sort of map, which you may or may not be able to really see, it's a little crowded now. We marked on there in these little tree stumps that are going to appear, areas where we saw deforestation with our community patrol, and in pink, I believe, is the Global Forest Watch deforestation alerts. And so the thing I want to highlight here is like the value of getting on the ground is you just see so much more granular sort of data. You know, we were finding instances of deforestation that wasn't being detected by Global Forest Watch. Which is not to say that Global Forest Watch is, you know, a bad tool. It's definitely a good estimate, but it's just really worth ground truthing whatever you're seeing when using these sort of tools. And so the reason that we'd sort of targeted this wildlife sanctuary for our patrol rather than Prey Lang is because those patrols are criminalized in Prey Lang. To do that is straight up illegal, and we love the law. But also, no, this forest is also being targeted by the exact same network of companies that are behind the destruction of Prey Lang. And so we thought if we could get an idea of what's happening in here, it would give us an indication of what the situation inside Prey Lang was like. So yeah, we were basically trying to correlate a lot of the data that we had from Global Forest Watch. Also, I'm just going to jump back to this one, because this we did through QGIS, basically using the University of Maryland's, I think it's the University of Maryland, the Hansen data, which basically comes out every year and is what Global Forest Watch bases their data off. So you can set you can download their deforestation data as TIFFs. These are sort of files that you can then import into QGIS, and it'll show you exactly where that deforestation occurred and tell you what year it occurred in. And so you can overlay that against their year 2000 forest cover base file and sort of give you an indication of how bad the situation is. Is it accelerating? Is it decreasing? What's happening? But yeah, I could bore you with the details of how we run those sort of calculations and data analyses, but that's a different talk for someone who's actually really good at that, not me. Yes, okay. So now I wanted to talk about the importance of building strong networks before you do these sort of things, because ultimately our situation got got pretty bad. You know, aside from nearly getting flipped over in the back of the koyan, aside from a videographer waking up one day with a strange rash identical on the inside of either thigh. Turns out he had slept on a certain type of beetle that has corrosive urine, and yeah, ended up with some really ugly blisters. But anyway, I'm just going to show you a little bit more from the documentary, because even though Praia Roca was supposed to be the safe option as opposed to Praia Lang, it turns out it wasn't so much.
Understand how that affects your ability, or the community's ability, to protect the forest, and whether you have those same problems here in Praia Roca?
នៅព្រៃបេរកាយើងអត់មានសមាជិកសហគមន៍ណាមួយ Okay, it's okay. It's cool. You're not motorbike.
Okay.
Oh, the ranger.
Huh?
Take it back.
Yep. I'll get it. We are currently crawling through the undergrowth of the forest. The Ministry of the Environment Rangers found the camp. We've been told that if they find us, they will try to kick us out of the forest. So we could hide, but go now.
So this is what I mean when I say build strong networks, because we were crawling around in the jungle for about an hour and having a very fierce debate, because some of the activists that were with had already been to prison once and really didn't want to go back again, understandably. However, the options that we kind of had laid out in front of us were on foot with no food or water, try to hike 13 kilometers through the jungle to get away from the rangers and find the nearest sort of exit, I guess, if you want to call it that. The alternative was to sort of turn ourselves in, because we understood that at least half of the group who had been having breakfast while we were doing that interview had already been detained. We knew that a lot of our filming equipment was already left at the camp as well, so it was really sort of a choice of, do we run or do we just accept that this might be the end of the trip and that there might be some pretty grim consequences? So during that time of back and forth of debating what we should do, we somehow, in all of the jungle, managed to find a tiny little pocket of 4G in which we were able to get the message out to a local human rights organization, just basically explaining, in the jungle, going to be detained. And thankfully, they took that very seriously and sort of sprung into action. And so they leaned on the British Embassy, because both myself and Andy Ball are British citizens, in case my accent didn't give that away. The embassy then contacted conservation groups that work in this specific area. Some of the conservation groups, who I'm not going to name, but there's not many, so you can probably guess, didn't really want to get involved. They didn't want to provoke the government or be seen to be on the side of these pesky journalists that are running around in the jungle. So the UK government then got on the case to USAID, which funded said NGO. And as a donor, then they said, no, you've really got to get these guys out of there. So eventually, we didn't know any of this was happening. We'd just managed to get the message out, and that was all we knew. So then we ended up going back to the camp, all these government rangers with rifles rifling through our stuff, which wasn't great. And so it took us the rest of the day to kind of get back out of the jungle in sort of a really sad convoy procession led by armed rangers. But then when we got to the end of the jungle and back to sort of, the main road of this small town in Praia, the rangers were given instructions to let us go. And so we went for several beers after that, which was really nice. But no, it was very fortunate. If we hadn't found that little bit of, that small area that had some mobile phone service, yeah, we would have been most likely jailed, at best, possibly deported or detained. And that would have been for the foreigners. For the Cambodians, the situation would be far more dire. So yeah, since then, Mongabay has very kindly agreed to finance a satellite messaging device so we can not rely on just being lucky again next time. But yeah, we did, I mean, obviously this was a bit of an annoying end to our trip. We hadn't really got all the data that we wanted, and we hadn't even done the ground truthing in Prey Lang, where we had seen this new logging road had been cut. So what do you do when you get kicked out of the jungle? You just go to the next jungle. Naming and shaming. So again, because logging in both Prey Lang and Prey Rock, wildlife sanctuaries, has been prevalent for so long, the network of businesses involved have been involved for a very long time, and this chirpy chappy here, Lu Chu Chang, has been involved in the timber game in Cambodia since the early 1990s. Has a long history of dispossessing indigenous communities of their land and then logging it into oblivion. Real nice guy, although you could argue that his eyebrows are perhaps an even bigger crime. But basically, after we narrowly avoided arrest, we went back to Prey Lang to make sure that we had ground truthed what we were seeing on satellite imagery and that making sure that it was exactly what we saw. So that was a little bit sneakier, just sort of a more discreet drive in, fly the drone over, and then get the hell out of there again. Because obviously our editors loved the idea of us going back to the jungle after the first trip. Right. I'm now going to show you just another little clip, because I think this interview kind of will help underscore some of the more farcical elements that really govern Cambodia and what make it such a fun place to report from because of the absurdity of the denials. I mean, if you've got a government that's trying to sue NASA, then you know you're dealing with some crackpots. But yeah, enjoy.
Recently, Jerry used satellite images to find a new road. This road connects the Think Biotech's concession to protected areas inside Prey Lang, showing that the company is possibly sourcing more timber through illegal means. To get more clarity on the purposes of Think Biotech, Jerry sat down with the company's CEO, Lu Chu Chang. In the interview that you are about to see, Chang denied the allegations against his company despite evidence. He also threw some hints to suggest who might be responsible for destroying Prey Lang.
So, do you think it's a coincidence that Think Biotech has been accused of illegal logging, and at the time that you took over from Think Biotech, the rates of deforestation in Prey Lang increased dramatically?
Actually, Prey Lang, I know, have a big trouble. But this problem not from me.
So earlier this year, between April and May this year, we've seen a road that was built from inside Think Biotech's concession. The road then crosses the border of Prey Lang and actually travels about 12 kilometers into the forest.
Okay, I know this problem. I know this problem. But this one, government involved this work and to check clearly. So all the process come to the government to take over all the problem.
So
They to investigate.
So
now,
was this road inside Prey Lang built by your company?
see, my company get a lot of timber right, but that is from my plantation area.
So how do you explain this road? Because if we look at the end of this road, you can see here very clearly that a lot of the tree cover has disappeared. Is this road being used by Think Biotech to take trees from Prey Lang back into your concession?
From my concession or not, I don't know. But I tell you, I never get this timber. Somebody I know, get this timber, but this is not our team.
Dương phụ dương chia cà phê đi để chúng ta xót qua để mình bỏ. Phụ bóng vừa lụa kia đá lên. Dương ban luôn đấy là rô ban phá chứ không được. Dương ban cái lô hai. Cùng về cửa máu đi.
Who is getting the timber?
This one, I'm difficult to talk. Government now to check this problem. They have data. Government have data. If this problem, I suggest you to check from the Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Environment or some police, economic police.
Why would the government know but you wouldn't if it's coming from your concession? Surely you know who is coming in and out of your concession.
Please no. I cannot talk too much. Government do investigation. They know well.
Yeah. This is why I like working in Cambodia, because there's just no shortage of characters like Liu Chu Chang, and we're pretty confident that he is the one taking that timber, because he has a sawmill right there inside the jungle, which is specifically there because his reforestation plantation is failing miserably. He even reached out to USAID, RIP, to see if they would co-finance it with him, which they said absolutely fucking not, because he's a known environmental criminal. But basically, through the course of this this interview, which to this day I still don't really know why he gave us this interview and was even insistent on taking selfies with us at the end of, because it just really became quite an incriminating piece. But he also gave us two kind of really key details that I'm going to jump into next. So I think this is one of the massive advantages that Mongabay has, in that we very typically kind of work with reporters either from these places that we're reporting on or who live there. And that's good, because then rather than having to sort of fly someone in, fly someone out, yeah, I know, it's a great photo. I love it. It means, you can stay with the story as it develops. And, it took us a bit of time, but once we eventually got our initial story published, back in October 2023, we also got a secondary one done focusing purely on Che Pre Roca Wildlife Sanctuary as well. But we were able to stay with it because, again, like I said, Liu Chu Chang gave us some pretty key details. Also, there's a QR code for the documentary, and there's the title of it if anybody wants or needs that. But yeah, I think a lot of these stories did get picked up by local media, which was good because at the moment, at least, Mongabay is unable to translate into Cambodian, into Khmer. So it did manage to generate quite a bit of noise. It led to a coalition of NGOs demanding that the government revoke their export licenses for Think Biotech and its sister company, Angkor Plywood. They have retained their export license, to nobody's surprise. And yeah, it kind of just painted a target on the backs of the community members and activists that we worked with. So overall, it was like a negative impact, I would say. But at the end of the day, these problems persist. They need documenting. There was a police investigation, I should say, into that new road, and we never heard anything back from that. So, yeah. But those details that Lu Chu-Chang gave us during the course of the interview, which was like an hour-and-a-half interview. Again, I really don't know what he thought he was going to get out of doing this with us, but it was great. He hasn't done one since. He named 2 Chinese companies that he is supplying plywood to in the special economic zone in the coastal city of Sihanoukville. If you ever get the chance to go to Sihanoukville, don't. It's absolutely bleak. It was ground zero for the what's become known as scam compounds that are operating within Cambodia, where victims of trafficking are stashed into large compounds and then forced to perform online scams. If you ever get those sort of WhatsApp messages asking like, hey, do you remember me? It's most likely someone that's actually trafficked into that situation. Although that demographic is shifting, but that's a different presentation. What we did find then was going to the Sihanoukville port and the special economic zone and tracking down these companies that were supposedly getting their plywood supplied by Think Biotech and Angkor Plywood. And so this kind of gave us the idea that we all knew, it was an open secret that Think Biotech and Angkor Plywood were involved in illegal logging. We managed to get a leaked USAID report from 2021 that referred to them as an existential threat to the forest, and then went into 22 pages of detailed evidence. So yeah, you can guess why that didn't get published. But no one really had any good idea on what happened to the timber afterwards. You know, there was reports from, I think, EIA possibly from a few years back, maybe 2016 or 17, that did detail this, but by 2023, no one really knew what the situation was. And so we wanted to sort of dig around into this. And again, this is why I think it's important to be able to like stick with a story and not just have to fly back out again afterwards. Because what we managed to find through transcribing the full interview and getting the names of these companies was that actually some of that plywood that was being supplied by Think Biotech and Angkor Plywood. That was then going through a Chinese company into the supply chain of an American firm that was selling sustainable flooring products. Some of it was not, so the plywood was going largely into this, into flooring companies. However, some of the higher end luxury species of timber that were being cut down in Prey Lang, we managed to get bills of lading leaked to us through a whistleblower in a logistics company that showed a lot of this was then going to Vietnam, China, and Hong Kong. Actually some to India as well, although we were never able to follow up on that. And so we did manage to get people in Hong Kong to try and see what the office of this so-called company looks like. And it was an apartment. It was, they had never heard of this company name. It was a residential block, so yeah, that's definitely something shady. However, so this is the sawmill that I was talking about inside Prey Lang, or like on the edge of Prey Lang Wildlife Sanctuary earlier, that belongs to Think Biotech. I had to go back and drive into the jungle myself to get that photo, because by that point, nobody wanted to go with me. But yeah, so this really undermines the sort of the narrative that Lu Chu-Chang was painting, that a lot of this was coming from their plantation, and that it was sustainably harvested. And so we were then able to basically trace that supply chain to some degree, not down to the exact shipments, which was unfortunately what the US Department of Justice requested that we do if we wanted to see any sort of real impact on this story. We would need to tip them off with the exact shipment that contained contaminated or illegal timber, which unfortunately we weren't able to do that. But we were able to map out exactly how timber goes from Prey Lang through Think Biotech, through the special economic zone into American homes. And so there is another beautiful photo of illegal loggers at work inside Prey Lang. And this is inside the Chinese plywood factory, who again gave us an interview, and I don't really know why they let us just walk around their factory taking photos. But one of the upsides to the abysmal press freedoms in Cambodia is that not many people are very experienced in dealing with journalists, so you can just kind of drop in and surprise people. But yes, basically, that was all down to the fact that we ended up having, let's see, oh no, sorry, I've jumped ahead of myself. So again, being in Cambodia, we were able to kind of stick with the story further and look not just at think biotech and Angkor plywood and logging companies, but also looking at other interests involved in Prey Lang. And this is what I mean when I said earlier on that its topography is extremely unfortunate, because it's a beautiful place and unfortunately hugely accessible and rich in a variety of minerals, including gold, which Chinese miners are happily exploiting, including iron ore, which sanctioned timber baron is also exploiting. And now what is basically the death knell to the protected area of Prey Lang. The whole sanctuary is being carved in two by a set of transmission lines that are basically going to open up access to the sort of deep core area of old-growth forests that previously has not been accessible. I mean, we've seen it sort of melt away from the edges and then given away in large mining concessions, but this, I think, will be the end, unfortunately. Oh, and possibly the most ridiculous. Just in January this year, the government has authorized the opening of a cement factory inside the wildlife sanctuary. So this is going to be supplied by limestone, which is already being mined by several companies that actually have ties to those human traffickers at the scam compounds in Sihanoukville I was talking about earlier on. So it's a very small country. Everyone knows everyone in all the worst ways. But yeah, so at the moment, you can see it's sort of a relatively small scale operation now, but yeah, very soon there'll be heavy industry opened up inside a rainforest, which is great. So, you know, a lot of the time when we're doing these sort of investigations and when you're talking to donors or to NGOs and researchers, you know, you get asked a lot like, well, what's the impact? You know, what's the most impact that we can have with these stories? And like I said earlier on, it's really kind of just more negative impact. Because in January this year, I was kicked out of Cambodia and permanently banned. So yeah, I'm now living in Bangkok, which is not that bad actually. But yeah, so this is basically the kind of end result of about 5.5 years of investigating various environmental crimes and the criminals' connections to the highest level of government in Cambodia. And so yeah, it's unfortunate that, you know, we're seeing a place like Prey Lang, which has great ecological value, just being quite recklessly squandered with not even a sense of at least there are some shared common benefits in its destruction that average Cambodians will enjoy. It's not. It's all just going into the pockets of deeply corrupt individuals with ties to either the military or the government. I'm actually running way ahead of time. So yeah, I think that's just about everything I've got to say. Obviously, there's me, but Andy, my long-suffering colleague who gets pissed on by beetles, this is a link to his website. Vuta, if you are ever in Cambodia and you need a fixer or a translator, he is the guy to ask. And Punlok is Punlok. Any questions? I know it's almost drinks o'clock, so I'll try and speed through them. Yes?
In the interview with the guy who runs biotech, okay, did you discount entirely his protestation, that this was government? I mean, if I understood him correctly, he was saying that government people were doing the illegal logging. And did you discount that, or did you? I mean, I understood you to say that, okay, the government's taking the wood out, maybe, okay, but what you were certain of was that it's going into his sawmill.
So, yeah, I guess this is one of the slight problems of only being able to show you clips rather than the whole thing. And even then, to be honest, we had to cut a lot from that interview because that man talks. But basically, his business partner, who he runs Angkor Plywood with, which, so Think Biotech is the reforestation project, and Angkor Plywood is the plywood supplier. And so Think Biotech does the illegal logging, sells that to Angkor Plywood. Angkor Plywood sells that to the companies in the special economic zone. However, the brother of the head of Angkor Plywood is a member of the Council for the Development of Cambodia, which is a fairly senior government organization, and his role was managing SEZs. So he was in charge of exactly who gets what in special economic zones. So we're unclear as to whether Lu Chu Chang was sort of saying like it's government, and because we knew that, we then later found that so much of this timber was being supplied through the special economic zone, if it was a reference to his business partner's brother, or whether it was necessarily because some of the people involved in the logging are themselves military, or if he was just trying to save his own skin, because we know that he has to pay. He later in the interview complained about how much money he was losing in bribes every month. Yeah.
Did you have the feeling, you know, when he said, I can't talk about this, I can't talk about this, did you have the feeling that he was afraid, or he was just misleading you?
He's a fairly well-entrenched character within the Cambodian logging scene, so I'd be surprised if he was genuinely afraid, but at the same time, it's Cambodia, so he could well have been a business partner for 30 years, but if at some point someone thought it would be more profitable for them to get rid of him, in whichever way you want to interpret that, then they would probably do it. So I could imagine for him it's not a particularly comfortable existence. And so likely it was more a case of, I think he was concerned about how much information he was giving away that would possibly implicate someone further up the food chain than himself. Yep.
So I was wondering, I had two questions. The first one is if you could elaborate a bit more on how do you find QGIS valuable? Because I've done investigations on deforestation but never used it, so I was wondering what's the practical, advantage of that. And also if you could tell us a bit more about what type of wood is that one that it's cut there, and whether you have proof that it's going to Europe as well. Thanks.
Sure, yeah. Okay, with QGIS or QGIS, however you want to pronounce it, I think a large part is if you want to say that logging is illegal or legal, you need to know whether it's happening in a place where logging is restricted. And so having the boundaries of the protected areas and being able to see on satellite imagery, is that deforestation happening inside a protected area, or is it happening somewhere outside of a protected area where, okay, it might not be legal logging, but you can't say for certain that it's illegal logging. Whereas at least if there is logging happening in a protected area, you can say with 100% certainty, nobody should be cutting down that tree. That's a straight up violation of many, many rules in Cambodia. The other application I would say for QGIS as well is we use it a lot for planning and logistics. So if you're going to remote parts of places like Cambodia where Google Maps is unfortunately not an especially reliable source of information because a lot of roads aren't mapped, a lot of roads aren't even roads, they're just sort of really dirt tracks. But if you are going to a sensitive area and you need to figure out, okay, in the event we are followed on this road, which other road can we take to get back out again? So I use satellite imagery and QGIS to sort of figure out places where I can fly a drone from and be relatively undetected, so somewhere roughly like 2 or 3 kilometers away from what I actually want to document. I'll use it to sort of map out journeys and sort of give rough estimate ideas for risk assessments. Yeah, it's just a very, very useful tool. Even what I was sort of touching on earlier, but I didn't want to get too deep into, was like the data analysis that you can do with QGIS when you get data like deforestation data from, like, say, the Hansen data, for example. You can run what's called a zonal histogram and basically overlay that data, and so QGIS will calculate how much of the deforestation in any given year occurred in an overlay of the protected areas shapefile. So you could do that on the Global Forest Watch platform by uploading each individual protected area and seeing like how much deforestation happened there. But QGIS is just much faster. It's much more efficient. You can do the whole. I mean, there's like 72 protected areas in Cambodia, so to do that repeat over and over again in Global Forest Watch's platform is not ideal. Whereas like in QGIS, you can really you can do a lot more than what I'm even capable of. To be honest, it's an incredibly powerful tool. In terms of the species, it's a mix. I know the Khmer names, but I've forgotten the scientific names. But largely, a lot of what we were seeing exported was what's classified under Cambodian law as grade 1. We ran the list of species that we'd found named in bills of lading past a very sympathetic official at the Ministry of Commerce who was absolutely terrified of talking to us for fear of what might happen. But he basically confirmed that any of those species would be illegal to export. And so none of it should have been happening. Yeah, in terms of Europe, I don't believe we ever found any concrete ties between the companies and the European market. But we also maybe didn't look necessarily in that direction. There was a lot of trade data that we got from Panjiva, courtesy of the Pulitzer Center, helping us out with that one. But if I remember rightly, I don't think anything pointed in the direction of Europe, but that situation could have changed by now, because one of the Chinese companies involved was particularly upset with our reporting and sent a very aggressive letter to Mongabay, and I don't want to go too deep into that because I'm not entirely sure where the situation has landed at the moment. But either way, yeah, they weren't happy. Anyone else? Have I got time for any more? Okay, yeah, we've got 5 more minutes. So.
You mentioned about going into the protected area and then obviously being caught. Did you ask? Did you ask first and you were rejected and then you went in anyway, or did you ask and they didn't respond, or did you just not want to tip them off, so you just go in and ask?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, and this is where you can argue the ethics of it, but given the nature and the profile of some of the activists that we were travelling with, we didn't want to inform the Ministry of Environment ahead of time because we knew that they would just come and arrest us immediately. And for some of those activists, that could mean proper jail time again. Some of them, again, they had already served jail time, so they were very, very reluctant to run that risk. We did debate whether or not we should do that and sort of say at least we tried, but also we've tried previously in other protected areas to be like, hey, we just want to go have a little look around and say how well managed this protected area is. And even that was either a harsh no or deafening silence. So yeah, just kind of had to run and gun it.
How did you form the relationships with these activist communities originally? Are they quite public facing, so you can kind of just get in touch, or did it require a little work on the ground?
A little of both, to be honest. Like, they are quite public facing, but obviously due to the security concerns in Cambodia, they're not super forthcoming. I think if you reached out of the blue, they'd probably be quite paranoid, thinking like, who is this guy? Can we trust him? And so that's where I think, the fact that I'd been like fairly prominently reporting on Cambodia for several years, when we approached them to say, hey, look, we want to look into illegal logging. We know you guys do these fairly discreet patrols. Like, can we tag team this and see how it goes together? And so that helped, that they knew Mongabay, they knew me, and their new Punlok. Punlok, I didn't really give enough credit to earlier on when I said that's Punlok. He is a former Buddhist monk turned journalist, having just been basically outraged at the continued environmental destruction in Cambodia, and as a result has like fairly good ties to a lot of environmental activists where Buddhism is sort of a bit of a overlapping kind of theme there. And Punlok, I mean, he might look fairly sort of small and diminutive there, and fairly calm, but yeah, I've seen him being dragged across the street by soldiers, just sort of very peaceful and floating by as he's about to go get interrogated. He's an incredible reporter, so if you ever get a chance to work with him, I'd recommend it. Yep.
Have you already started looking into Thai forests? And if so, is it just tree species that you're looking at as well, or like the wildlife impacted by habitat destruction?
I'm branching out. Oh shit, no pun intended there. No, I'm having to branch out on account of, losing access to Cambodia. But the problems in Cambodia are quite unique. The region, the Mekong region, where I'm sort of now expanding my focus, is a really, really divergent region. Like the problems of Cambodia are not the problems of Thailand. Thailand has unfortunately already cut down large parts of its forest, but it does actually do a fairly good job of conserving what's remaining. I think from the 2024 deforestation data, maybe something like 5% of all deforestation in Thailand in 2024 happened in protected areas, whereas in Cambodia, it was something like 60% of all deforestation was happening in protected areas. So it's a very different set of issues, but we are looking into some new things, not just in Thailand, but Laos and Myanmar as well. We have a very juicy story coming on the illegal wildlife trade in Laos, so maybe in about a few weeks that should be ready. But yeah, unfortunately, Cambodia has very Cambodian problems. So I'm having to do a lot of learning very quickly now to try and wrap my head around, what are the problems and the risks associated with the rest of the region.